Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Excavation Safety Alliance Town Hall. My name is Karen Strupp, Vice President of Communications for Infrastructure Resources. I appreciate you joining us for today's Town Hall, How Can GPR be used successfully in damage prevention, which is sponsored by Impulse Radar. Our ESA Town Halls are an open forum to discuss concerns, present potential solutions, and improve damage prevention and excavation safety. Today's meeting, as all of our meetings, are meant to be a discussion, and you're encouraged to ask questions and share your own solutions. If you have a question during the town hall, please type it into the chat box or click the raise hand icon. Give us a few seconds and we'll give you permission to unmute yourself. To unmute, you'll simply click on the microphone icon in the top right corner of your screen. Please try to keep your comments brief to allow others time to interact. Also know that a recording of this town hall will be posted on the ESA website, along with a brief blog post and our chat log. If you comment through the chat and you do not want your comment or name included, please note that with your post. At the conclusion of the call, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure that we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. We will conclude today's session today at 11:30. And I'm pleased to have our panelists who bring a wealth of experience, and I'm going to allow them to give some background before we begin. So, Dan, would you mind introducing yourself for our audience?
Sure. So my name is Dan Bigman. I'm the president of Bigman Geophysical. Our company basically provides educational programming and support solutions for engineers, contractors, and public and private utilities. So we focus on damage prevention and those working in sort of in the SU and design phase, of construction and facility maintenance. And so basically what we try to do is just provide innovative solutions, to help those in the industry that are helping others. And so I've been working with GPR for, over 15 years, and I appreciate, the forum, and I'm glad to be here.
Great, thank you so much. Matthew?
Sure. My name is Matthew Dragon. I work for Screening Eagle Technologies. I'm the director of GPR for North America. I counted it out this morning, 16 years in the industry, several different manufacturers, as well as the largest GPR practitioner in the US, locating company. So a lot of different experiences in the marketplace, still very active out there, selling GPR equipment. And I don't know if I would be an expert, but I certainly have been around for a while, and am looking forward to this conversation.
That's great. I think as we begin, I've looked at some of the attendees that are here, and it looks like we have a broad spectrum of understanding. So, Matt, if you would, can you just give us a high-level overview of what is GPR?
So I'm going to do a really high-level, simplistic overview, and I think Dan is probably going to get more technical. But basically, ground-penetrating radar is comprised of three components: a radar antenna, some sort of display to image data, and then an encoder wheel. So the encoder wheel measures distance as you move the antenna across the surface of the ground, and findings are displayed on some sort of a tablet, or manufacturer's tablet, or an iPad or something like that. And essentially, radar works by putting a radio wave into whatever medium you're traveling over the top of. And that wave travels down through the soils, ground, and then when it hits something different than the medium that surrounds it, there's a speed change in that wave, and a reflection is caused back to the antenna. That reflection is then digitized and imaged on a screen, and that's essentially how it works. The important takeaways here would be that the radar is traveling through that medium at a particular speed, and when it hits something different, there needs to be a sizable speed change to enable that image to be created. Frequency is a word that gets kicked around the industry a lot, and there are different antenna configurations, different frequencies, different sort of strategies with antennas, but essentially, in a simple way to look at it, the higher the frequency, the higher the resolution. The lower the frequency, the lower resolution, but the deeper you can penetrate the ground with it. And the key to radar is to take that frequency, that waveform, and have it hold together and travel down deep into the ground, so you can get results from the deepest point you can. So Dan, that was the basics, I think.
I think that was the detailed
more.
version. No, I think, look, you covered a lot, obviously, in there, and to kind of, I guess, summarize, right, what you said is GPR. For folks in here that work with electromagnetic locators, or pipe cable locators, or referred to in some industries, is GPR works on electromagnetic wave pulses, but specifically it works on contrast, right, of the target of interest compared to whatever that target is embedded in. And if there's sufficient contrast, like Matt had said, then the GPR has the potential to record that reflection. And if there's limited contrast, even if an object exists, then it may be really difficult to record a reflection response, and targets may get missed, right? So really the fundamental core of how GPR works is on contrast, unlike a locator, which works on really the fundamental principles of electrical current. And so, the last thing I'll say is the benefits and limitations of GPR are that it works on contrast, right? It has the potential to identify non-metallic, non-conductive objects like PVC pipes, but it also struggles to identify what the response really is after it comes back, because you're not tagging on to anything, right? You can get a response off of a metal pipe, a PVC pipe, a wire, a clay pipe, whatever it is, and really, I think you have to use your experience and your visual inspection of the site to try to get more layered and detailed and nuanced understanding of what each of those responses are. But that's kind of what I'll say, is just that it really focuses on that contrast between what's in the ground and the ground itself.
So Dan, I would ask. I'm sorry. I would add to that this conversation today, we're probably going to reference pipe locators, almost as much as GPR. And the reason is because you don't really go out and do a thorough investigation of the underground if you're looking for utilities, unless you have a pipe locator coupled with the use of GPR, sure, which is super important because they're different technologies. And when you find the same thing in the ground with both technologies, you've got a redundancy that's built into the investigation, and that's key. So I'm sure that Dan and I both agree that as much technology you can bring to bear on a site, additional to GPR, it would be critical to the success of that investigation and the results of that investigation.
Dan, can you speak to why GPR is particularly useful for damage prevention?
Yeah, well, I think if you take a look at the history, I mean, kind of like Matt was even alluding to there, right, which is that now we're lucky because we live in a situation where you have the potential for multiple tools and technologies to try to investigate the subsurface. But that wasn't really always the case, even though GPR has been around for decades, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, whatever it is, it hasn't been really approachable by the broader damage prevention industry up until, I would say, the past decade or so. And so I think what it allows and helps people to do, or what its benefit to the damage prevention industry is that it gives that extra layer of confirmation that you might have identified targets of interest with a pipe and cable locator. And then the second step of that would be it has the potential to identify things that a traditional pipe and locator can't identify. And so I think those are the two major things. It helps increase confidence in your locate, number one, that you have maybe two technologies that identify the same target of interest, which should really help people feel more confident and comfortable about what they're seeing. And then it has the potential to identify things that other tools just can't identify, right? So if you have a concrete pipe buried 4 feet down, and there is no tracer wire, which it typically won't have, then there isn't really many other tools that you can use. There are some, but still far less accessible than a GPR is now. And then, one other thing that I'll say as far as GPR goes is over the last, 5 to 10 years, is the design of the GPR, and specifically like the user experience and user interface has become much more accessible to the field technician. And for a long time, it really was the expert's tool. And I think what companies like Screening Eagle and Impulse have done is being able to take that tool and make it approachable by a much wider group within the industry.
Sure. Matt, as we're looking at kind of the expansion for the group that's using it within the industry, can you give us an overview of the current state of the GPR marketplace?
So I always separate the market into three different buckets. You have the 811 contract locator, where most of their work is, well, I would say all of their work maybe is done with a pipe and cable locator, right? They bring an important service to the industry, whereby they're making people aware of the potential hazards underground, right? It's all about communication, notification, and them going out and performing that work. Do I think they would ever use GPR? I think that maybe sometime in the distant future, but not anytime soon, because these folks are going out. They have a really busy schedule, where they're trying to complete tickets all day long, and I think they have a limit of time that they can spend on a particular job site, and they have to keep moving because there's so much work out there for them to do that. So that would be your 811 group, right? Very important to the industry. And then there's this middle market segment that is, the private utility location companies that are out there that are using GPR pipe and cable locators, metal detection, all kinds of different snakes and sondes that they can put into PVC lines and find them. So a variety of tools to the investigation. And oftentimes these folks, their day is broken into maybe a half day locate and a full day locate, whereby they're bringing whatever technologies they can bring to bear on that particular investigation, to get it done, completely and efficiently, and then communicate those findings to the asset owner or the end client, excavation company, whatever. And that is a very vibrant piece of the marketplace. That's millions and millions of dollars a year, spread out between all companies all over the United States and Canada. And then you have this other segment of the market, and Dan, you can put color on this if you like, but which is the subsurface utility engineering piece of it. So you've got a civil engineering firm that it has embraced the discipline of SUE, which is ASCE 3822, American Society of Civil Engineers guideline to the location and communication digitization of the findings underground. So this is an engineered product with 4 different levels of investigation to it, usually with a digital deliverable, and level A being the highest level investigation, where you actually put eyes on that asset in the ground, and usually results in a large CAD rendering of everything underground. So that's really where the market is. You can put companies into these 2 different buckets, and there's a certain amount of overlap. You'll see in the private utility locator space, which they use GPR every day. You'll see that they're also producing some digital maps with a level of accuracy, where the SUE deliverable is definitely highly accurate, and usually it does require a PE stamp on the end deliverable. So that's where I see the market is, and there's probably a large archaeology market out there that Dan can speak to, that I'm kind of not as flush with information on, but and regular geophysics and geology investigations.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say, just to kind of dig back into those 3 buckets, because I agree with kind of Matt's characterization, of it. is that in the 811 space, what we are seeing as far as the trend goes is, yes, typically they're not using GPR. The one kind of sub-segment that we're finding is starting to pick up GPR units and using them is the water and sewer folks. And I think in part it's because those are the most difficult to find with a pipe and cable locator. And so compared to electrical, right, which is typically able to get direct connected to and trace out, or the telecom or even gas if you're in a place that happens to have good tracer wire kind of rules around it and people adhering to them. One that we're finding is typically remains difficult is the water and sewer. And so we're finding those folks are adding the pushcart GPR to their toolkit at a faster pace than any other 811 folks have been doing it. And we're finding that they have a lot of success, right? They're still going in and they're still going to try with a pipe and cable locator first, and then supplement that with a GPR. Often not very complicated, investigations, but if you have a known point, a hydrant, let's say, or a manhole cover, and you can see a direction it's going, then if you take sort of short strikes at it, you're often able to trace that out to another logical endpoint. And we're finding that water and sewer companies are able to do that. But yeah, I mean, I would completely agree that it's used far less in that 811 space, but obviously has the potential to facilitate and help others, not just the water and sewer people.
Right.
So
We do have,
if I can, I'm sorry.
yes,
That's a huge point, Dan, and we're seeing that too, that these municipalities are being asked the question, how do you not know where all your assets are? And the excuse of, hey, we built this out over the last, 50 years and four guys retired in that time and they installed it and they thought they know where it is. And now we have data lines coming down these streets and we have all this kind of activity that municipalities are definitely embracing it as an addition to their technology. You've got the cross-bore concern where directional drilling is potentially, putting gas lines through drain lines from homes and developments and things like that. So there's a lot of interest from the municipal marketplace. And I would also say that these folks are definitely attempting to build their own GIS platform where all of this infrastructure and underground assets are somewhat digitally located. And that's really the end goal of a lot of these municipalities.
As we talk about the different utility segments that are using these, are you guys seeing something geographically of different areas that are embracing it a little bit more based on soil conditions, and being able to find less pack, or being able to find some of their utilities a little smoother?
I mean, you want me to? Looks like Matt wants me to address that one first.
Go right ahead.
We're not as much as you think, but we do get pushback sometimes when we try to go and evangelize the importance of using the technology in places that the geological map would suggest would be difficult. And what we find is that pushback comes from more of a lack of understanding of how the technology works, and a lack of understanding of why you're really putting yourself at risk when you limit the number of tools that you use. Less so in the 811 space, more so in the private utility locator and SUS spaces, where if you're not using GPR just because you live in a place near where infrastructure resources are located out with lots of clay and things like that in some of those parts of the country, is when something is hit, it's damaged, they're going to ask you what you used. And, my recommendation is be able to say that you tried everything you can. The other piece or a pushback that we have in those situations is just because a geological map indicates that GPR might be a poor, it might get poor responses in a given part of the country, or even if you live, he's got it available, even if you live in one of those, areas that have a lot of clay, like I do, right? In northern Georgia, we have a lot of, magnetite and hematite rich clay. Is everywhere you work isn't necessarily that compact, undisturbed clay, which is problematic, right? A lot of places that you're working in built environment scapes, happen to have excavation. They happen to be looser, unconsolidated soil than like our natural compact Georgia clay, though they might be covered over with pavement, which is going to protect it. And all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, while a system you have might be designed to go 15 or 20 feet, and in Georgia, where we're working, it's only going, 4 to 7 feet, it still might hit 90% of what's in the underground anyway, right? And so recognizing that that there is pushback, but we try to push back on that to say, you're doing the people in your communities a disservice by not using all the available tools that you have, especially if you're in the private utility locating space or in the SU space.
So I would add to that soils are always a challenge, right? And when we go and we show equipment in Florida, we're just so relieved and happy, and because we're going to get great data all over the place. But all over the United States, the soils are not that great. And if you think about it from the standpoint of some of the changes that have happened in GPR equipment, whereby we're using some higher frequencies, and that first maybe 3 to 4 feet is a higher frequency data set, and these higher frequencies can show you more detail. You may not see the line in the ground, but you may see the trench line that was created during excavation, right? So if it's, and Dan can speak to this, if it was installed in the last 10 years or so and the soils are different enough, you are going to see some sort of a difference in that particular spot. There also is different ways to image the radar now, as far as imaging your results inside of a map. So maybe you have weak reflections in one spot, but then you have some, better reflections in other spots. And maybe you're picking up mostly trench. Well, if I'm picking up mostly trench and I still see where they excavated, that's a big help to my project, right? I may be able to see that plastic line in the ground, or at least where they installed it, right? So radar is not a solution for everything, but it definitely is a tool that contributes to the information that you use when you find these things underground.
Our third panelist is able to join us now. So Forrest, if you're able to unmute yourself, I know that you had some comments to add.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay right now?
Yes.
Great. I'm sorry, I'm in the mountains of Colorado and internet was bad, but and I still have a bad hair day, so I'm not turning on my video. I'm not like Matt Dragon or Dan Bigman with perpetually coiffed hair. So anyway, but I've got there's some issues that I have with the whole the soil suitability map is really cool. It's pretty because it has lots of colors. I've got it hanging on my wall. My kids love it, but I almost think that that's used as like a hey, look, see, we're in a bad area. We're in a red spot, so we can't use GPR here, and it's almost used as an out, as a hey, so we're not even going to try this here. And I agree completely with what Matt just said, that just because, and Dan, that just because you may be in an area where somebody where the government years ago decided this whole area is bad, that does not have anything to do necessarily with your site conditions and how well ground penetrating radar will work there. And I think that I have seen guys do exactly that. Just say look, I just never even pulled a GPR out of the cart in this part of or out of my truck in this part of the country. And I think that's bad practice. I think that that's to go a step further, perhaps. I hope I'm not overspeaking or overstepping my bounds here, but I think it's frankly a little irresponsible, professionally irresponsible to, if you have the tool and it might work, then you have a professional obligation to your customer to try the tools that you have. If other tools aren't working, and you have GPR there, you pulled the GPR out. I've had GPR work in on a site where I was seeing down, I was getting pretty readable data from around 4 feet. And then I had this one odd part of the site where, for whatever reason, I was seeing down a solid 8 feet. And it was a pretty large area. And I was able to see a few things in that 8-foot area that I couldn't anywhere else. And so you just never know what is actually going to happen if you don't pull your GPR out of the truck in the first place. I think you're just shooting yourself in the foot and doing a disservice to your customer.
We have a couple people that have echoed that sentiment in the chat, and they say to miss the opportunity to identify a trench due to the soils being perceived as unfavorable doesn't absolve the liability for damage. So I think people are in agreement. Dan?
Yeah, and I just want to add one other piece, right? In addition to the trench, is there are subsurface services that are easier to identify in wet clay soil. And people get this all the time. They say, well, it's a bad soil to use it. And it's like, well, it's a bad soil to use it depending on what you're trying to look for, right? So if you have, a PVC pipe that's a couple inches in diameter and it's filled with air, right? It's easier to identify that in clay. It's more difficult to identify that in dry sand because the contrast, like we spoke about, Matt and myself in the very beginning, is very limited between dry sand that's really porous and filled with air compared with a PVC pipe that's filled with air, right? It's limited response to that. But a PVC pipe filled with air embedded in some, moist clay soil in the top 2-3 feet is going to be easier to image. And so the idea that, how do the soils, it's like nobody asks, or not nobody, but right, the people who aren't pushing are not asking the second question, which is, well, what's the target that you're looking for, right? They're sort of only concerned about project conditions versus like, what are you trying to identify? And this is a critical piece that I think, like I said, the people who push back on not using it in those conditions don't recognize that next step, which is not just about the soils you're working in, it's about what's the target that you're looking for embedded in those soils.
We do have a question that came through the chat, which says, how do you recommend locating plastic water lines with GPR? I'm guessing now that the second part of that would be, what's the environment that they might be in? But what would your recommendation be for locating plastic water lines?
Well, plastic water lines are, they're not a, I don't even try. They're a, all right, let's see what tools can work best here. I would change the question to, should I try locating plastic water lines with GPR? My response would be, yeah, sometimes, kind of depends on the situation. If you've already got your GPR out and doing that work on a site, then yeah, absolutely, I would go over there and try to locate it and see how that goes. But if GPR isn't working, like we all, like hopefully most of us, if not all of us, know, GPR is no silver bullet, and it has to be in a construction setting. It has to be used in conjunction with other methodologies. We use, for plastic water lines that don't have any kind of a tracer, which is kind of rare on water lines. We use an acoustic locator when we can't see it with GPR. It's cumbersome to set up and a little bit messy, but it works pretty reliably when GPR doesn't. And I think that's an important consideration in construction settings. You just have to have other tools in your toolbox there.
Sure. As people might be looking to start with GPR, what training is required or recommended for a standard competency? And Dan, if you'd be willing to speak on that.
Yeah, there's a couple options that are available in North America, let's say. I'm not sure about everywhere else, in the world. The one that's most prominent is that we have found is NOLCA, the National Utility Locate Contractors Association. So they developed a standard, actually both for locator competency and for GPR competency. And the standard is really it's a minimum standard. And but I think that the team, and I was not on this group that developed it, but the team that developed it really put together a good list of knowledge points that a new technician should know before going out and using GPR. And so, I know that different people have different lengths of courses. So I can just speak to ours just real quick, just as an example, is, we do basically, it's a day of video online with all the conceptual, theoretical and some practical knowledge. And then it's like a full day of hands-on. And so, certification doesn't mean you're an expert. Okay, it means that you've been tested on the standards developed by whoever that accreditation body is, in this case NOLCA. And so it's a few days. But here's what we've also seen pushback on across the country in different schools that teach GPR and locating competency is everyone wants to be an expert right off the bat. And the truth is, the only way to do that is to get experience. And so what we have found is that even a few days, wherever you go get your education from, is a few days goes a really long way, because it really speeds up your learning curve when you start getting the experience, right? And so when you go and a lot of people do it now, kind of what we call the tribal method, right? Which is where they'll do a lot of ride-alongs, and you might go with some different people, and then when you sort of get to what they think is competent, then you're kind of out on your own. And it's an okay method. It's better than just handing somebody a GPR and saying, "Hey, you're the GPR tech now, go do this," which we've seen happen to people before. And so the problem with that standard kind of ride-along method is you get conflicting information from different people, and who's right, who's wrong, who's a senior person. Just because they're senior doesn't mean that they're right, because they may never have been trained. And so I think training is really critical. And our sort of best results that we've seen with our students are people that start in a company. They don't do their first 2 days of work, in our training programs, but they'll do like 3 to 4 weeks of getting just exposure, with the company that they're at, and then coming to a training program. So it's not totally from zero, but have an understanding of how it all fits together in the company that they're working for. And then when they get, a few days of training, a few days of online, a few days of hands-on, and then they go back, they're able to apply that knowledge pretty quickly. And so that's kind of what we have seen as being a really appropriate amount. And then the other piece is that, training should never end. I mean, it certainly doesn't end for me. I don't think it ends for the two other panelists that are on here. We all recognize that things change. Hey, there are systems available now that were not available 6 years ago. And so as that happens, you want to make sure that you continue to get up to date, continue to learn, continue to get peace of mind, and keep your continuing education going. While that's not a requirement in the locate industry, it should be a requirement for anybody who deems himself a professional. And so that's the way that I see it, and I'm not sure how, the others do. But
let me contribute to that a little bit here. And you're absolutely right. It is super important that you go through some sort of formal training. And it's better if you get a couple of days underneath your belt so you understand what's actually happening out in the field. And then there's ongoing training. But what's interesting about GPR is it is a technology, but it's limited by the physics of GPR, right? Like no one's going to fix that. No one's going to fix physics, right? So, but what's interesting is that there are other complementing technologies that are coming into play with your GPR data, right? And when I think about pieces of equipment, like what I sell, and also Impulse, the sponsor of the conversation today, we're always making changes. Like we put out an update probably every couple of months with our system, and there's a new capability, there's bug fixes, there's different ways to handle the data. And if you're not a student of GPR always and a student of your piece of equipment, you're going to miss out on something. And there's going to be something that's going to be added that you're not, using out in the field. It's all about capabilities. It's all about options. And I'm sure that practitioners that are on the call out there probably have been on many sites where they say to themselves, I wish there was just one thing more I could do to possibly make my data look a little bit better, or to possibly get me a different view, or to possibly do this because I know something's down there, I just can't see it. So that's kind of it. You've got to be a student of it ongoing, always.
I do want to talk about the data a little bit more, but we did have a comment come in through the chat saying they're finding that GPR operator competence in their region is becoming an issue. Training needs to be part of any company policy or even an industry standard. This is an opinion-based question, Forrest. I see that you've already gone off mute, so I'll start with you. Do you see there forming an industry standard for training other than NOCA, but something where it is required rather than recommended?
Required is a difficult word. I well, I'll just share my opinion. I hope that this may come across the wrong way, so don't burn me at the stake right off the bat. I hope that it doesn't become required, because for it to become required, that kind of implies governmental intervention. That means that the government has had to step in because they feel like this is a huge public safety issue, and just like requiring a driver's license, nobody can go out on the road without a driver's license because, hey, you're a danger to the public without this, so we're going to step in and require a driver's license. I hope that we don't have to have the government come in and start managing us. And so in that way, I hope it doesn't become required, but I hope that it becomes such a strong that it's difficult to get on a site and practice in this work without a customer saying, hey, you meet these standards, right? You meet ASCII 3822, don't you? Like the PAS 128. PAS 128 in the UK is just so well adopted and understood, and that those hosers over there, they never have to wonder if the customer's going to ask them about it. It just happens. Whereas I have so seldom, I could count on one hand for the years that I've been in GPR that I've had anybody ask me, are you licensed? Are you certified? Because none of my customers know that exists. But I believe that it is good for the industry. I just hope that the government doesn't have to step in and require this. But I'm afraid that it may require something like that in order for this to become a universally accepted standard. And I have a guess as to why that is, because GPR, as it was remarked in the comments somewhere in here, GPR is just it's so easy to go out and just do some testing with GPR. So why not pull it out of your truck and try it? For that, in the same way, GPR could be seen as very easy to pick up. After all, you push it on the ground. I had a customer one time who became a competitor who said, let's be honest, Forrest, GPR is pretty easy. I mean, there's not much to this, right? And I said, well, okay, let's agree to disagree. There are aspects of it that are easy, for sure, just like there are aspects to any job that could be considered easy. But there are so many opportunities, so many ways that can just be royally screwed up, data misinterpreted, hyperbolas missed, other non-hyperbolic geometries missed. So I believe that this should be a self-regulatory topic where we don't have the government get involved. But I don't know if we're going to do it. We may have to have some massive problem and have the government step in.
Well, it is a massive problem because there continues to be, damages across the U.S. reported in through the CGA. And I see that Brenda made a comment, and she's kind of an influencer herself. It is best that the industry is regulated by the people that are in the industry, right? So we don't get government involved. And that's where you have organizations like the CGA, trending towards some sort of a certificate program or, minimum requirements there. I personally would like to see something that's similar to like the SUE guidelines, ASCE 3822, where there's some sort of a private utility locator guideline that's out there and agreed upon by the industry. I know the company that I used to work for, GPRS, has a specification that they follow in the field, and it's public. And I think that that's a good practice for any of the private utility locators that are out there, in that they say we're going to do XYZ on your site, and we're going to do XYZ on your site every single time. And with XYZ, we've found that our investigation results are as complete as you can possibly get with the technologies that are available. And I think that's a good practice and the way it should be presented throughout the industry.
Dan, did you have anything that you wanted to add on that piece, or?
I mean, not really. I mean, there is a question in the comments, which I do want to address, because this obviously is, as an industry, we're not doing a good enough job of showing this. And I wanted to come across as a plug, but they said, are there recommended or ongoing trainings? I mean, if you go to our website, just as one, and there's a bunch of training companies out there. We just happen to be in the Southeast. There's a very popular one in the Midwest. There are a number of training outfits out there that their mission is to make people in the field competent, accurate, improve workflow, and ultimately to make our communities and workplaces safer, right? And so they are going out there. Like we hold open training options every month in our Atlanta office. And so, it's just they are available out there. The problem that I saw when I came in and started doing this, and I didn't come in I was an educator prior to kind of getting into this space. And then I came in as a contractor, and a lot of people that I was coming across said, hey, we own GPR, but and locators, we just don't have somebody here who's, proficient. And they said, would you train us instead? And I said, sure. I came from academia. And so I started to train. And part of the issue was, how did there not be enough training? And so the only training that was primarily available was with the manufacturers. And so you're sort of subject to where they were, and as well, and which is great. It's excellent. I'm glad the manufacturers provided training, and they still do. But there are more third-party options out there, and people can go ahead and search those out. And again, the issue that I saw was, how did people ask me where the training was? How I didn't understand how there wasn't an infrastructure for that, and so that's why we started to put on as many as we did. And I don't care if one person shows up or 10 people show up. We want to make sure that we're available to people, when they need it to be available. And so we started putting them on, running them every month out of our facility.
Wouldn't you say though, Dan, that over the last 10 years, certainly GPR has been embraced by the construction industry, and the education component of it has just greatly increased, and we're in a much better spot than we were 10 years ago.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, there was almost no infrastructure, for training options. And I think now there are a number of them, and somebody said Staking U is available also. They're in the Midwest. And so I think companies like them and like us have tried to push that availability for third-party training. And not force people into just a limited set of options. And so, yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's far better than it was then. But it also comes back on us as trainers and training companies, and education providers, that why is it not more known? Because people, if they're asking, where are the ongoing trainings? I think that's my fault. I think that's, Staking U's fault. I mean, we push. It's far more known now than it was. But I think it speaks to that we need to continue to do that, right? I think you're right. We're in a better space, but I think there's room to grow, and I think we have to have that exposure continue to expand, so people recognize that, like, oh, okay, well, there is convenient and accessible training options for me getting into this industry, or for my new hires. And again, what that looks like, and whether it's a certification that's a NOLCA certification or one that's built by a private company, at some point doesn't matter. Get certification and education are not necessarily the same thing. And so making sure that people who are utilizing the technologies are educated, I think, is the critical piece.
We do have some more pieces going on in the chat where there's some suggestions of additional training options, so people can look to the chat that we'll send out at the conclusion of this as well. Matt, one of the questions that I have for you, a while ago, we were talking about the data that you can receive. And as we look specifically to damage prevention, and having some of that for their own protection, what are the most effective strategies for digitizing and organizing their data that is obtained through their scanning?
So we see this in a lot of industries, right? you know, think about the youth of America today. Nobody walks down the street without one of these, right? That they're constantly looking at. Everything is digital. Everything is going from paper to the cloud. I'm probably an antique by even saying that statement, right? So, you know, what we're finding is that the ability to integrate GPS, corrected GPS signals to your GPR data and to designate different things that you see in the data with a digital location, that's really where the industry is going, because everybody wants a map now. I think the days of having a GPR and a pipe locator and going out and putting paint on the ground all day long, it is a part of the market, but it's a shrinking part of the market. I think technology is driving you know, a digital deliverable to the end user. So you know, this is not only happening in the SUE world, but also in the private utility locate world. I think I would bet that it's also going to start to happen in the 811 world, because if you think about it, the way the world is today, where everybody's talking about leveraging data, right? Your 811 practitioner out in the field is going to start to collect digital points on what they find. It's going to go into a GIS system, and it's going to be logged in as, you know, we visited this site, you know, 6 months ago, and this is the results for it. So you're going to see a mapping effect that is going to overtake the US, I think. You think about other technologies like the 4M people that are using satellite imagery to image where, in a historical context, image where these utilities could be and pipelines could be. So there's all kinds of things going on, and it's all going digital. And I think that the trend in industry is to go that direction. I don't know, maybe Dan, you're seeing some of that as well, where it's not just teaching GPR, it's teaching some other technologies.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think integration is becoming a really popular kind of pathway forward. And like you said, is the kind of mobile GIS movement is picking up steam. And, you know, as you indicated earlier, a lot of times you're going to municipalities and it's like, well, you've been building it out for 50 years. We don't know where half the stuff is or more. They're recognizing that they are sending technicians to the field daily to, you know, to locate on tickets and to be able to do that and then record, even if the GPS points aren't, you know, corrected, even if they're not survey grade, even if they're mapping grade, whatever it is at least you have some sort of understanding of the distribution, right? And so I definitely think that that's one of the very, you know, fast growing aspects of utilizing GPR and locators for that matter. And obviously these technologies now with more robust, you know, data acquisition modules, whether it's a proprietary computer or it's an iPad, is they're able to handle just a lot more layers, right, of information and tag them together. And so we're finding that, you know, the other piece is the ease of doing that is becoming, you know, important, where it's opening up that accessibility, right? Because a lot of times it was, okay, well, we're going to paint on the ground. We're going to have a whole nother crew come through and do this. Now, you still might do that if you're a SUE firm and you really want to get that, you know, millimeter accuracy. But if you're a municipality, you want to kind of have the general distribution of everything that you have, then you should be tagging that stuff on to the locator and to the GPR as well. And it's definitely something that is being asked for now. I think in the community to say, hey, you know, we want the technology, we want the integration, we want the understanding, we want the training, you know, for this sort of mobile GIS performance going forward.
We do have one question that came in that said, excuse me, what data types can be exported from the GPR software that will be suitable for import in the GIS environment? Is anyone comfortable?
So I mean,
Yeah.
we export from the field DXF or a shape file or a KML, KMZ file right off of the iPad in the field. And I think there are probably other manufacturers that do similar.
All right.
Yeah, yeah, and just from one other layer on top of that is what you're exporting. We find there's two main, when I say file type like .dxf or whatever, which are important ones, and shape files and KMZs, but like the type of information that's typically getting exported out of a GPR, when you're looking at it from a GIS standpoint, are either going to be time slices, which would be like top-down plan view maps of the amplitude reflections around your site, where you've covered with GPR. So it's kind of like a heat map looking image. And then the second type of output is typically going to be like line drawings or point drawings, like a shape or file or something like that, where your interpretations are getting exported out and then can be viewed, in three-dimensional space. Right. So those are kind of the two like physical kinds of datas, right? And they're usually coming out as either DXF shape files, KMZs, or like a GeoTIFF if it's going to be an image, from a time slice or something like that.
So I mean, what we like to teach that if you're out there collecting data and you're seeing this hyperbolic shape, which is essentially, a target in the ground. If you see that shape, not only should you put a paint mark on the ground, but you should put a tag into the system. So the tag is going to have your northing, easting, and also calculated depth of that particular item in that spot. But you also put a piece of paint on, a shot of paint on the ground. So you're creating your digital file and also kind of your on-site file deliverable at the same time. So all that can happen in the field.
Well, and yeah, and I think that's important, right? Is I feel like as that was getting developed, a lot of people looked at that stuff as either or, right? It's almost like, is it 811 or Sioux in that respect, where you're just painting on the ground, or are you designing off of it? And now you kind of don't have to make that choice, because you can paint on the ground. It takes you all of a matter of, half a second to just touch the screen where that, response came from. And it's tech. You may never look at it again, but you can't, it's not efficient to go back and try to redo it and then retag it, right? While you're there and you see it and you're painting on the ground, boop, that's all it takes to have that tag in there. So I think, Matt makes an important point.
We did have a question that came in, and I don't know that it can be answered, but what is the max depth that GPR will read, or is it mostly dependent on soil conditions? Matthew, are you comfortable?
Yeah, let's just say 30 feet, always. No.
I was going to
No,
say
not
45, Matt. You're aiming low, buddy.
Not at all. So yeah, it is subject to soil conditions. We can do some contrast here though. If I'm in really great soil conditions, and my system is set up to, essentially listen longer into the ground, you're looking at something like 15 plus. But if I'm in bad soil conditions, I'm probably only looking at my high frequency data, which is going to give me, 2, 3, maybe 4 feet into poor soils. Dan?
We had one question about how they can network with other GPR operators. Jessica, who made the comment, said as far as she knows, she's the only one in Kentucky. My first thought would be different LinkedIn groups, being those that are more immersed in the GPR industry. What do you guys recommend for networking?
I mean, forums like this certainly help, right? I mean, we have a very lively chat, obviously, and people commenting on other people's stuff. And so I think doing things like this, infrastructure resources, putting this stuff together, I think is really helpful. Because that's another thing that I think for a long time was a real problem. Obviously, the GPR consortium is out there, and then other state level. We've had a lot of success networking and finding other practitioners at state level groups. And going to, like in our case, the Georgia Utility Coordinating Council, right? That's always a really, really good forum to go meet other people, talk. What are your problems? What are you encountering? What are the difficulties? What are you getting asked to do? We find that does kind of change state to state sometimes. And so that state level organization is often a really good place to go find other people.
We do have one question. If somebody can see the question from Brock Daniels of what's the accuracy of the XY data, northing and easting, sub-meter, sub-foot, or survey grade centimeter accuracy?
Fixed position, less than 5 centimeters.
Thank you. That was much
It
easier than I
depends on
thought it was
what
going to
kind
be
of.
to answer.
It was way too easy, Matt. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's like I know it.
It's gonna. All right, listen, you hoser. All right, look.
So I would say that you know, there are pieces of equipment out there that can connect to a base station, can connect to a total station. So you can get as accurate, sign into your own RTK network. So you can get as accurate as you want to get, off the shelf, you know, sub 5 centimeters with corrections.
All right, we
That
have
all
less
depends on
than,
what you have hooked up to your GPR. It's at the end of the day, yeah.
all right, we have less than 5 minutes to go for today's event. So I would like to know, what's a solution or step that somebody can quickly take to improve their process, whether it might be just even learning more about GPR, adopting GPR, or if they're already working with it, advancing what they're doing. Dan, would you like to go first?
You know, again, as an immediate thing, there's information out there. I mean, we have a YouTube channel that we have like 130 videos or something like that for free. You know, I think it's a good place to start, honestly. You know, it's free. You can do it at your own pace. And I think it's helped some folks in the past. So YouTube's always a good thing. If I can't, my wife tells me to do something at home and I don't know how to do it. I mean, the first place I go to is YouTube now. So it's you know,
don't
I
go
think
to
it's
the
a good start.
library?
Huh?
You don't go to the library?
Well, you know, that's when I look to, you know, when my kids are being rowdy, then I go to the library and nobody's allowed to talk there. So I go and relax. But I think that's easy. Obviously, look in the areas that you're in for training options, and just reach out and speak to people and understand what's in the curriculum, you know, what that cost is. No matter where you go, the cost is typically going to be far outweighed immediately afterwards for what you get out of a training option. And so a program. And so just, you know, yeah, just keep trying to look for new ways to educate yourself. There's obviously a handful of really good books out there as well. But that's what I would do to educate first.
And you know,
Matthew, how about you?
I would say that I know all the manufacturers in this industry, and everybody is, you know, has great character and is not going to send someone down the wrong road, and is going to be very upfront and honest with the capabilities of their equipment and where it fits in the industry. And everybody is willing to help, I think, find resources for other people. So, you know, I trust that you know, the industry and the different manufacturers are all going to be respectful. We all know each other, and you know, just reach out to people, and you can learn a lot.
And last in, Forrest, I might regret having you wrap it up, but what are your thoughts?
I already got it.
That's okay. So does everybody else on the call. So I completely agree with what Dan and Matt said. In addition, I suppose, or to echo part of their answers, is the single most important thing that I've done to increase my professional competency in all ways, including with GPR, is just not being afraid to, you know, when I find somebody on LinkedIn or through that, you know, I take a training class together with, or whatever setting, whatever medium, I don't, I'm not shy to reach out to them and just ask questions and wear out their phone. If they are come across as friendly, then I will just ask them questions and pepper them with as many of these situations that I come across that perplex me as I can. And my experience has been the vast majority of people, if they're out there, putting themselves out there on LinkedIn or in training courses, and they come across as friendly, then they actually are very willing to help. I've been very, very pleased with the level of just camaraderie within this industry. And I think that's at a very high level, and you can expect that most people are really quite helpful.
I agree with you. I think also for the GPR segment, there seems to be a prerequisite of a sense of humor and a playfulness that you guys all have. So that's always appreciated too. But I appreciate everybody sharing their thoughts, concerns. We've talked about some potential solutions. I agree. connecting with people through LinkedIn, making sure just asking the questions. Everybody in this industry seems to be really receptive to helping guide somebody along as they have some questions. For those in the audience, if you would, please take a moment now to fill out our brief survey that Levi will post in the chat so we can continue to improve our discussions and address topics that are important to you. Please note that there's an additional field if you'd like to receive a complimentary 2023 excavation safety guide. And on behalf of everyone at IR, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. A recording of this town hall will be posted on excavationsafetyalliance.com, where you'll also be able to register for future town halls. Our next is July 13th, where we'll be discussing utility locate fees, a solution to over-notification or a safety risk. To our panelists, thank you again for sharing your expertise. To our sponsor, Impulse Radar, thank you for your support, and we look forward to seeing y'all again next month. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day and stay safe.